Elena Voss counted the envelopes on her kitchen table for the third time that night, as if counting would change the numbers written inside them. It did not. Her father had been gone for 8 months, and the debts he left behind had grown like weeds, choking every plan she tried to make for her future. She was 26 years old, tired in a way sleep could not fix, and completely unprepared for the knock that came at her door just after midnight. The man standing outside wore a plain black coat and spoke in a quiet, formal voice. He said he represented a private lender who was willing to erase every debt her father had left behind. There was only one condition. She would have to marry a man she had never met, live with him for exactly 1 year, and then she would be free, debt gone, life her own again. Elena almost closed the door on him. It sounded like the beginning of a scam, or worse. But the man placed a folder on her table before she could refuse, and inside it were the exact amounts owed, the names of the creditors, and a single photograph of a man with sharp eyes and dark hair, standing in front of a stone building that looked older than her whole city. His name, the folder said, was Ronan Draven. He did not look like a man who needed to buy himself a wife. He looked like someone used to being obeyed. She should have said no. Every instinct told her to say no. But she thought of her mother's medical bills, her younger brother's tuition, the interest that grew every single month like a living thing eating her alive. So 3 days later, wearing a plain gray dress and carrying one suitcase, Elena signed a contract she barely understood and was driven through iron gates into a world she did not know existed. The palace at Vermore did not look real. It rose out of a forest that seemed to swallow all sound, its towers cutting into a sky that felt closer to the moon than any city she had known. Servants who moved too quietly greeted her with careful, watchful eyes. Some of them, she would later learn, were not entirely human at all. Ronan Draven met her in a long hall lit by candlelight, and even from a distance she felt something strange in the air around him, a kind of pressure, like standing too close to a storm that had not yet broken. "You understand the terms," he said, without any greeting first. "I read the contract," she answered, keeping her voice steady even though her hands were not. "1 year. You live here. You play the part of my wife in public, and in return, your family's debts disappear. Nothing more is expected of you." His eyes moved over her once, assessing, not unkind but not warm either. "And nothing more should be expected of me." "I understand," Elena said. "I'm not here for anything else." Something in his shoulders eased slightly, as if her answer had removed a weight he had been carrying. "Good, then we understand each other." She did not know yet that Ronan was not simply a wealthy man, with strange staff and an unusual home. She did not know that he ruled over an entire hidden kingdom of shifters bound by laws older than her own country, or that his council had given him 90 days to take a mate or lose his throne to a cousin who wanted it far more than Ronan ever had. She only knew that his eyes held something heavy behind them, something he was trying very hard not to show. The first weeks passed in careful distance. Elena learned the halls of the palace, learned which servants would meet her eyes and which would not, learned to eat dinner across from a man who spoke only when necessary, and watched her far more than he spoke. She told herself this was fine. This was the arrangement. She was here to disappear into a role for 1 year, not to understand the man playing opposite her. But distance is hard to keep in a house that large and that lonely. It was Lyra, one of the younger palace staff, who first slipped and called Ronan something other than "Your Majesty" in front of Elena, quickly correcting herself with wide, frightened eyes. It was a stable hand who let it slip that the king had not smiled since before his father died. It was, more than anything, the night Elena found Ronan alone in the palace gardens, gripping the stone railing so hard his knuckles had gone white, his breathing rough and uneven, sweat on his brow despite the cold air. "You should go back inside," he said through his teeth, not looking at her. "You look like you're in pain. It happens sometimes. Around the full moon. It will pass." His voice was strained, each word costing him something. Elena did not know why she stayed instead of leaving. Perhaps it was simple human decency. Perhaps it was something else she could not yet name. She sat down on the garden bench nearby, not touching him, not saying anything else, simply staying until his breathing slowed and the tension in his shoulders eased. When it was over, He looked at her with something like surprise, as if he had expected her to run, and was unsettled that she had not. "Most people leave," he said quietly. "I'm not most people," Elena answered, and immediately felt foolish for saying it. But Ronan did not laugh at her. He studied her face for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes, and then he simply nodded, as if filing the information away somewhere important. After that night, small things began to change between them. He started arriving to dinner on time, instead of finding excuses to eat separately. She started asking him questions about the kingdom, and he started answering them honestly instead of deflecting. Neither of them called it anything. Neither of them dared to. It was 3 months into the arrangement when everything changed in a single moment neither of them expected. There was a gathering in the palace courtyard under a full moon, some kind of ceremony Elena did not fully understand, and in the crush of the crowd, Ronan reached out to steady her when she stumbled on the stone steps. His hand closed around her wrist, skin against skin, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. Elena felt it like lightning moving up her arm and settling somewhere behind her ribs, a warmth and a pulling sensation so intense it stole the breath from her lungs. Ronan went completely still beside her, his eyes wide, his jaw tight, staring down at where his hand still held her wrist, as if it had betrayed him. "What was that?" Elena whispered, her heart hammering. Ronan released her hand as though it burned him, and stepped back, his face pale under the moonlight. That should not be possible. What should not be possible? He did not answer her that night. He simply turned and walked away, leaving Elena standing alone in the courtyard, her wrist still humming with a warmth that would not fade. It took her 2 days to get an explanation, delivered reluctantly, in his private study, with the door closed and his voice carefully controlled. "Among my people, there is a bond," he said. "It is supposed to only happen between 2 Lycans, when fate decides they belong together. It is not supposed to happen with a human. It has never happened with a human." He looked at her as though she were a puzzle he could not solve. "But it has happened. I can feel what you feel now. I dream what you dream. I know when you are close, and I know when you are far, and I did not ask for this any more than you did." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. So this is a mistake, some kind of magical accident. "I do not know what it is," Ronan admitted, and for the first time she heard something raw in his voice, something that sounded almost like fear. "I only know it is real, and I do not know how to undo it." In the days that followed, Elena told herself the bond meant nothing, that it was simply a strange side effect of a world she did not belong to, something to be endured until her year was finished. But it was hard to believe that when she woke in the night knowing, somehow, that Ronan was awake too, pacing his room, thinking of her. It was hard to believe when a wave of sadness rolled through her out of nowhere, and later she learned it was the exact moment Ronan had received news of an old friend's betrayal. Their minds had begun to blur together at the edges, and neither of them had asked for it, and neither of them could stop it. The Elder Council learned of the bond within the week. Word traveled fast in a kingdom built on secrets, and what they heard enraged them. A human, bonded to their king, not chosen, not approved, not even a Lycan at all. To the council, it was not a miracle, it was a disgrace. Ronan's cousin, a sharp-eyed man named Callan, who had wanted the throne since before Ronan was born, used the scandal like a weapon. He whispered to the council that a king bonded to a human was a king who could not be trusted to protect the bloodline, that Elena was a stain that needed to be removed before it spread further, that Ronan himself might no longer be fit to rule. Elena felt the danger long before anyone explained it to her plainly. She saw it in the way certain nobles looked at her now, cold and calculating, as though measuring how easily she could disappear. She felt it most sharply at a formal banquet 3 weeks later, when a wave of dizziness hit her so hard she nearly collapsed at the table, her vision swimming, her body suddenly weak in a way that had nothing natural about it. She did not remember much of what happened next, only fragments. Ronan's voice sharp and furious, shouting for a healer, his arms catching her before she hit the floor, the bond between them screaming so loud in her mind that even in her panic, she could feel his fear as clearly as her own, feel him refusing to let her go. She survived, The healer said later that something in her food had not agreed with her, though no one could say exactly what, or how, or why only her plate had been affected. Ronan did not need proof. He had felt her distress through the bond the instant it began, faster than any guard could have reached her, and it was that same bond that let him find her side in time. When Elena woke in her own bed the next morning, Ronan was sitting beside her, his eyes red-rimmed from a night without sleep, his hand wrapped tightly around hers, as though letting go might cost him something irreplaceable. "I almost lost you," he said quietly, "and all I could think, in that moment, was that I had wasted 3 months pretending this bond meant nothing, pretending you meant nothing. I was wrong." Elena's throat tightened. "Ronan, I am not finishing this because a contract told me to," he said, cutting her off gently, his voice steady now in a way it had not been before. "I am not asking you to stay because of 90 days, or a council's demands. I am asking because somewhere between debts and duty, I stopped seeing you as an arrangement, and started seeing you as the only thing in this palace that ever felt honest. If you will have me, I want this bond to be real, not because fate forced it on us, but because I choose it. I choose you." Elena had spent 3 months convincing herself she was only counting down days until she could leave. She realized now she had stopped counting weeks ago, without even noticing the moment it happened. "I choose you too," she said, and meant it completely. 2 days later, Ronan stood before the full council with Elena at his side, his hand steady around hers, and declared her his true mate before every noble who had ever doubted her. Ancient law was clear, even to those who wished it were not. A bond that formed on its own, without command or ceremony, could not be dismissed by bloodline tradition, no matter how uncomfortable it made the old guard. Callan's challenge collapsed within the hour, stripped of the scandal that had fueled it, and with it went any hope he had of ever taking the throne. What began as a desperate arrangement between a king fleeing forced marriage and a woman fleeing crushing debt became something neither of them had dared to hope for. Elena Voss, once dismissed as a temporary human bride, bought to satisfy a contract, was crowned Queen of Veremore before the same council that had once called her a disgrace. Years later, when courtiers whispered about the strange beginning of their king and queen story, Elena would only smile and say that fate had never asked her permission. It had simply waited, patient and quiet, until 2 stubborn hearts finally caught up to what it already knew.